Like a cobra, you remain coiled in a loose but compact position, and your strike should be felt before it is seen. These are the words of Bruce Lee. It is the night before Chinese New Year that I begin to write this show. The new moon is welcoming in the year of the water snake. Hello and welcome to Occult Lives, and this episode is about serpent's lore. The Chinese years are named after 12 animals, these 12 being the only animals to turn up to a meeting called by Buddha with the animal world. When a snake year comes around, it is a good year for secret negotiations as well as undercover investigation. But there is a warning of double dealing and scandal. In the old tales from the Holy Land, it is said that if one should come across a snake, one should address it with respect with the following words: "By your permission, blessed one." The snake is revered throughout the world, often regarded as a sinuous, slithering, silent but striking creature known for their strange movements, whilst also being able to strike with the rapidity of a death-dealing blow. There is a snake adapted to every environment, be it mountain, water, grassland, in trees, so there is a snake to fit all categories, except in Antarctica, the only land they seem to have not crossed. The many varieties means an assortment of colours and lengths, so it is a myriad of species which comes with a myriad of tales. I have been fascinated with the creatures since I was a child, encountering them in stories of the Old Testament, believing them to be linked to the devil, so they put a fear in me, perhaps just a childish fear, but they can put a fear into anyone. They should be respected for their elegance, their smooth skins, their colours, their patterns, but the fact is a boa can strangle you whilst others have a bite so venomous death is in minutes. Snakes need strong muscles to move themselves along and to raise themselves up as they have no arms or legs. Their defence mechanisms are to spit and bite, and different snakes have different venoms and distances that the venom can be spat. Venom usually causes respiratory problems and paralysis. Snakes rarely attack, usually only defending themselves from predators. When they are threatened, they either run or go into defensive mode. The hiss is the first warning to their attacker. If it is a rattlesnake, they will rattle their tail. Depending on the variety, most snakes use spit as their defence. They will raise themselves up, try to puff themselves out to make themselves look as big as possible, and then spit at you. Snakes' venom can either affect the blood or the nervous system. Some snakes have venom that can affect both, a toxic cocktail like the puffer snakes have. Some snakes have venom that takes a while to work, which can be handy for obtaining food. The snake waits in ambush, then as the prey goes by, they lash out and bite. They infect the prey with their poison. The prey runs off, but leaves a trail that the snake can sniff out. The snake follows the trail and soon comes across the animal that is dying from the venom. Some snakes use constriction as a defence. The pythons wrap themselves around their prey or attacker and squeeze the life out of them. Other snakes coil, then raise themselves up into an S shape when they are in defence mode. Their skin is made up of scales, which creates a thin coat that makes snakes shed their skin. This shedding process begins at the snout, where the skin splits, then peels back, so that the snake can wriggle its way out, leaving a complete but dead skin behind. Snakes have no eyelids, which is why their eyes never close. Their eyes are covered with a transparent layer of skin which protects them. Nor do they have external ears. A snake has poor eyesight and senses other creatures and its surrounding area by feeling vibrations that have been created. Snakes taste the air and feel its vibrations by sticking their forked tongue out in front of them, quickly snapping at the air to get a taste. The odour particles their tongues pick up are given a sensory analysis so the snake knows where it is. Some snakes have at the base of the tongue and at the top of the windpipe a tube that helps them breathe whilst they swallow their victim. The mouth jaw can dislocate to help engulf the prey, which would lead to asphyxiation without this tube. All snakes have inner organs that are long and narrow to fit their bodies. Most snakes have only one functioning lung. Snakes cannot cough, so cannot rid themselves of liquid and waste from the lungs, which is why snakes are prone to respiratory infections. Once full from a meal, a snake has to lie low for a few days to digest, its digestive juices melting away the skin and the bone. They have small, simple teeth with either front fangs or back fangs. Front fang snakes swallow their food whole because the tissue of the head and throat are elastic, so that snakes can unhinge their lower jaw and their skull and take in that fat rat. Some snakes have natural antifreeze, so they can hibernate in cold winters. No one actually knows how snakes and serpents have evolved. The current theory is that they have evolved from reptiles, but there are no fossils or other evidence to prove this. No one actually knows how many species of snake there are or has been. They seem to have evolved on every continent except Antarctica. The world was created, of that much we are sure. Every culture has a creation myth relaying how they came to live in that country with their ways, and almost every culture has a snake or serpent involved in some way with the construction of the known world in that myth. Here is one tale from the Muslim cosmology, Allah and the Serpent. In the beginning was Allah, the great God. Allah began creation by writing on a tablet the destiny of all. He then created a great white pearl, which melted and became water. Allah then made a throne to sit upon, and around this throne lay a great serpent, coiled in a circle. The serpent's head is a giant white pearl, its eyes sapphire, and its body gold. None but Allah knows the size of this serpent, so it is said. This serpent holds up the throne of might that is the Lord. It is the seat of glory and majesty. In India, Shiva is known as the master of dance, and this is how he or she, Shiva can be either, created the world, by dancing. He is usually depicted as having a snake as a garland around his neck. Shiva got this snake from the rishis, the holy sages, who were attempting to stop Shiva from dancing and creating the universe. They threw the great deadly snake at Shiva in their second attempt to stop him. Originally they had sent a giant tiger which Shiva defeated. Shiva caught the giant snake and began wearing it as a garland around his neck. The snake then became Shiva's symbol of conquest. Shiva also has living snakes in his matted hair and also wears them as bracelets. There is an old Egyptian saying that before heaven and earth there was a brood of serpents. Whatever you do, wherever you go, tread carefully, beware of the oldest of the old. One of the oldest symbols is that of the Ouroboros, the snake that has its tail in its mouth. The most perfect shape is a circle, and that is what this snake is making as it seems to eat its own tail. A snake symbol representing life, throwing off the past and continuing to live, because all life is a cycle that will continue throughout. The symbolic serpent continues its cycles, devouring its own tail, so new life can be fought and reborn. It is an essential condition of existence. Ideas become old, new ideas are formed from the old, like shedding a skin. Plutarch says the Ouroboros is also a symbol of deity, as it feeds on its own body, as all springs from God, and all shall return to God. Another symbol of the snake with its tail in its mouth has a mermaid within its circle. This is the sign of acquiring immortality from the study of literature. The mermaid has her song, the snake has the wisdom. Together they learn. There are also pictures depicting the eagle with the serpent, and this is thought to mean that the bird represents the release of spirit, and the serpent is symbolic of bondage to earth, mind and body symbolism. How thy serpent, Rerik, advance not hither. Behold Seb and Shu. Stand still now, and thou shalt eat the rat, which is an abominable thing to Ra. That was from the papyrus of Nu, which is in the British Museum, and it is asking for protection from the evil snakes that awaits one in the afterlife. In ancient Egypt, the day and night is divided into divisions. Throughout these divisions, Ra, as the sun, travels through the world, being consistently chased by Apep, the great serpent, who wishes to devour the sun god. This monster serpent Apep is symbolic of all that is evil. It represents Set, demon of darkness, demon of thunder and lightning and whirlwinds. Set tries to prevent the sun, Ra, from rising by obstructing the bark of Ra with Apop, who is depicted in the company of a crocodile boom, whose tail ends its shape in a serpent's head. Ra has a bodyguard called Keti, known as the spitting serpent. It belches fire at Ra's enemies. Ra also has 12 small serpents that pour fire from their bodies to light Ra in his way. In the Egyptian calendar, the day and night are divided into divisions, and some of these, especially the night divisions, have serpents in them. The 5th division of night is the domain of Sokar, the underworld god. Sokar has 3 human heads, a serpent body with wings. The 7th division at night belongs to Osiris. Here he has fiery serpents that obey him. These fiery snakes have hands and feet and also carry sharp knives. With these knives they cut and slash the souls of the wicked who have been judged by Osiris. The 8th division of night is full of spitting serpents that lighten the darkness with fire. The 12th division of night, Ra enters the tail end of the mighty serpent and emerges out of its mouth as Khepera, a beetle. And then, in the last division of night, Sekhmet, Ra's lion-headed daughter, slays Apep every morning so her father can carry on his journey by day. The sun god emerges for the new day, and some say Isis and Nephish join him in snake form at this time and place. In Egyptian lore, the serpent could represent many things. It was the symbol for the earth, for life of earth, for rejuvenation, fertility, regeneration, and immortality. Isis wants Ra's power. To get this, she must discover his secret name. When Ra is an old god, he drops some spittle on the ground as he walks along. Isis collects this and bakes it. She makes a concoction with the divine spittle, her own magic, and some earth, which she makes into a spear, which in turn becomes a poisonous snake. Isis throws the spear snake into the most travelled path of Ra. One day Ra travels that path and is bit by the snake that is hidden. The burning venom poisons Ra's body and Ra is stricken. Ra manages to call forth his children, including Isis. None of them are able to help Ra. Then Isis, feigning shock, offers to help with her spells. She convinces Ra that the only spell that she can use involves him revealing to her his secret divine name. Finally, after much persuasion by Isis and too much pain for Ra, the sun god reveals his secret name to her. Isis cures him, and with Ra's secret name now in her possession, she is also able to gain his power. Isis is now Ra's equal. So the serpent has brought Isis the power she craves. Pharaohs, sorcerers, and some characters from the Old Testament often cast down rods which become a serpent. This was also a trick by Egyptian magicians. It is said that this can be done with a species of serpent called the Narjahaji, an Egyptian cobra. Pressure applied just behind and below the head paralyses it temporarily. When thrown to the floor, it is shot back to life. In the Old Testament, Moses marches east out of Egypt on his God's instructions. God reveals himself to Moses as the Lord, your healer. He then instructs Moses to make a bronze serpent raised on a pole. This bronze snake was used for healing those who suffered from snakebite. They were healed by touching this pole. The Queen Pharaoh Cleopatra took her own life with the bite of an asp. Cleopatra knew her poisons, knew that the asp should give her a quick, painless death that would leave her looking as a sleeping, beautiful queen. A fitting end for such a powerful queen? Suicide by an asp? The asp is also the uraeus, the emblem of the pharaohs. It sits proudly from the front of the pharaoh's diadem. It is the image of the god Wadjet, and it protects the pharaohs by spitting flames. The serpent is seen to represent the crushing of enemies, giving them the protection of the divine and a royal symbol. In the Greek myth, Cassandra was made an oracle by a snake. She had fallen asleep in Apollo's temple, and a wise snake approached her sleeping body and licked her ears. When she awakes, she discovers she can talk to the animals and prophesies the future, including Troy's doom. In ancient Greece, snakes were welcomed into the home, and often there was a pet snake altar in the house. Medusa was supposedly a snake-headed monster, beheaded by Perseus, who protected his eyes from her deathly gaze by the use of his polished shield. Medusa was born as a daughter to the Mother Earth. Her brothers were defeated by Zeus, and she was banished to the outer lands, with her face frozen in a grimace, able to kill any mortal with a stare, and her locks had been turned into snakes. Another version is that there were 3 sisters, daughters of Earth. Their mother was the Queen Cato, and their father King Phorcys, the deities that ruled the earth. It is said in some tales that Phorcys had snakes hissing from his hair like a mane. These three sisters were called Stephano, Eulalia and Medusa. The youngest, Medusa, was immortal, and her beauty was unsurpassed. She had beautiful golden locks of hair. People were stopped in their tracks by her beauty. So she was turning her heads before she became a monster, when they were turning their heads away from her. Her two siblings were also beautiful, but they lived as their parents, as gods, and were immortal. They also had brothers, but these young men were attacked by the sons of the sky gods. They were slaughtered. The sky gods took over the earth, and Medusa fled. The sea god, Poseidon, fell in lust for Medusa, and it is not clear whether Medusa obliged her an affair or if she was raped. Either way, Poseidon's wife, Athena, found out about the liaison. She was consumed with jealousy and hunted Medusa down. Athena, with her powers, transformed Medusa into the monster she became known as. No mortal could look upon her frozen grimace without instant punishment. This look that had destroyed all of her beauty also now turned any person or thing that looked upon her to stone. Medusa's gaze was fatal. Her hair, once glorious tresses, had now become withering serpents. Her stare was so fatal that not even these snakes could look upon her. Even her dead head still was able to petrify people to stone. When Perseus finally defeated her, he gave this head to Athena, who wore it in her breastplate, believing that terror drives out terror. Another version has Zeus being the god who raped Medusa, and his wife Hera being the one who put the curse upon her. If snakes were cowboys, some would wear white hats, whilst others would wear black hats. Whichever town they rode into, they either bring good or bad with them. Their reputation often goes before them, and metaphors such as sneaky as a snake, slippery as a snake don't help their cause. Then there are other sayings such as snake in the bosom, which is a sign of envy or ingratitude, a snake in the grass, a sign of malice. But then there are more gracious meanings to the snake in art, such as the snake resembling prudence, which is often depicted as a woman holding a serpent. In the Gospels, Matthew 16, the snake and dove are mentioned. Be as wise as a serpent and as harmless as a dove. Yet a forked tongue is the sign of a flatterer, like the devil as a snake was to Eve, someone who deceives by flattery. So just what was that serpent up to in the Garden of Eden when he tempted Eve to take the fruit from the tree that was forbidden to her and Adam by command of the Lord? Because of the incident with the snake, women have been blamed and oppressed for this original sin forever. It is a long-held error that Genesis associates the snake with the devil that tempted Eve to eat the apple. Genesis says a snake tempted Eve. It is not literally written that the snake is the devil. It is later that the church associates these two. The snake was not associated with the devil till much later. After all the wars and atrocities, people began to believe there was an evil force in the world. Before, it was believed God was almighty, both good and bad. Now God was regarded as the light, whilst the serpent that had tempted Eve with the apple was regarded to have performed an evil act, so must be the devil himself. The Christians may believe the serpent brought sin into this world, but the snake is also the goddess of rebirth. If Eve had not been tempted by the snake to eat the apple, we would never advance forward from being the children of God to be able to find our own way as adults, no longer with God's hand to hold us. The snake, having enticed Eve, becomes revered. The snake opened up to us the need for knowledge. In Gnostic belief, the serpent of Eden that tempted Eve was in fact the Saviour, sent by God to teach Adam and Eve the knowledge of good and evil, so that they could see the evil nature of the world that was part of God's creation, and make sure that they stay on the good side. So the serpent is also an embodiment of wisdom. But if the serpent encouraging Eve to aspire to possess divine wisdom is wrong, then God has to punish the snake, and God did this by removing his legs and told him to go forth on its belly. So originally the snake had legs and was presumably walking erect. You will crawl on your belly and eat dust, and there will be an enmity between man and snake forever. Genesis 3:14. This is humiliation to any of God's creatures, as dust is regarded as being the food of the dead. In some other accounts of the tale of the Tree of Life, the devil had already been thrown out of paradise way before the Temptation Act. He had been a jealous angel who envied the humans and refused to honour them. The banished devil bribed the snake with promises of luxuries if he would help the devil into paradise. The serpent hid the devil in the hollow of its fangs, and they entered the Garden of Eden. The serpent released the devil by the trees, and there he awaited the human pair. The devil met Eve, and the temptation began. The Lord punished Adam, Eve, the devil and the snake by throwing them all out of paradise, each one from a different gate. Adam from the gate of penitence, Eve from the gate of mercy, the devil from the gate of malediction, and the serpent from the gate of calamity. Sometimes the snake was not such a cunning creature. In the books of Solomon's wisdom, the snake came to King Solomon to ask him to restore his legs to him. The king told the snake to meet him at his next destination, where he will announce his decision. Sometime later the snake arrived at this destination and once again asked for an audience with the king. He had the same request: could the king restore his legs to him? King Solomon replied that since the snake had managed to get to this destination, he was thus not in need of legs. Mukkalinda is the serpent king who protected Buddha whilst he meditated under the Bo tree. The Buddha was seated meditating when there was a massive storm. The Buddha was unaware of it due to his deep concentration. The gigantic serpent king rose from the waters and sat behind the Buddha. The royal snake held his head high over the Buddha, his hood protecting him from the storm. Rupa is the name for the hood of the serpent that sat and covered the Buddha prince whilst he meditated and reached enlightenment. But the snake also represents anger in Buddhism and appears at the centre of the round of existence, with the pig and the cockerel representing the three sins of humanity. Leviathan means coiled, and is also the name for the seven-headed monster in the Old Testament who resides in the depths of the seas. In the Book of Enoch, the Leviathan was a companion of the Lord who apparently turned on the angels. As punishment, he was banished to the depths of the seas. It is said the Leviathan will rise again in the end times as a demonic beast. St. Patrick went to Ireland and he rid the land of snakes. But did he mean the reptile snakes, or was he using a metaphor? It is said he went to destroy human snakes, in other words bad souls, and it seems he went out there on a mission to start banishing the Druids, who supposedly use snakes and serpents in their rituals, though no one is absolutely sure what the snakes represented to the Druids. One known Druid ritual involved snakes is performed at Midsummer's Eve, where a giant column of wickerwork is erected and the Druids dance round it with snakes. In the myths, snakes guard sacred trees, places and treasures. The snake that guards has to be slain to gain the lost knowledge, treasure, or whatever it is protecting. There are epic battles, fights between heroic humans and the monster serpent. Some fight for Trevor, others to save the lady in mortal danger. All the best titles are of heroes battling against evil, a sort of trial whether an individual is in a battle or having to save the world. Hercules, on one of his many tasks, seeks the Hesperian Grove, where the golden apples grow. This is guarded by Ladon the snake, who never sleeps and has 100 heads, of course. Hercules, the strongest dude ever, defeats Ladon and gains the apples, and off he went on another task. In the time of Alexander, there was a valley of diamonds, and Alexander wanted to find it. It was guarded by huge venomous snakes, whose looks could kill a man. Alexander told his soldiers to polish their shields and use them as mirrors to advance on the snake guardians. The fatal glares of the snakes fell upon the mirrors, and so the men were able to advance, attacking the snakes and retrieving the diamonds. The 7 oceans of our planet cover about 71% of the surface. The majority of it is still uncharted, much of it too deep for humans to penetrate. What could lurk in those darkest of waters? There are many types of sea snakes. The collective name is Hydrophidia. Some are just water snakes, never leaving the liquid. Some sea snakes that swim in the oceans come out of the water and onto land. Serpents that live in the sea have adapted themselves to this way of life. Their bodies are flattened, streamlined, especially the tails. This is to help them to withstand the pressure of the deep waters. They use their entire body to swim with and absorb oxygen through their skin. They also have a special gland in their mouth to help them rid the salt from water. The sea snake can swim underwater for hours, but it must come up for air. It breathes, and when it comes to the surface to gain that lungful, that is when it is vulnerable to predators. The snake tries to come to the surface by night, when there is less chance they will be seen. Marine folklore of giant snakes that swim the oceans are rare. Though there are many reports of sightings of giant sea serpents, they seem to remain a myth due to the lack of actual physical evidence. There have been many reports of sightings throughout the records of seafaring, as well as encounters with such beasts in the mythical stories of the ancients. Here are some sightings of giant sea serpents from the 1800s, when there seem to have been a lot of reports of them. In 1817, off the Cape Urur harbour of Gloucestershire, near Boston, there were frequently seen 50 to 100-foot sea snakes. In 1819, in Nahant, there were seen a couple of giant snakes swimming in the local area for some week. This was witnessed by some 200 people. In 1861, a Captain Anderson stated he had seen 2 giant serpents on his travels near the Red Sea in October 1877. And in 1905, on December the 7th, a giant serpent was spotted off a yacht. Amongst the witnesses were 2 zoologists. The caduceus is another well-known and important symbol that is associated with serpents and snakes. Its great motto is, "All is one." It is often regarded as the staff of Hermes. The wings represent the spirit's triumph over the body depicted by the snakes. Maurice Cottrell says that Hermes is the original feathered snake man, and that these shaman snake men came once in so many years to guide humans. The caduceus emblem is a staff with a small ball at its top and a set of wings at the side of it. 2 snakes are entwined around the staff's length, their heads at the top. It is used as a symbol for healing. Another caduceus is that of Aesculapius. This emblem is a staff of 2 copulating snakes and is regarded as a medical symbol. Aesculapius was seeing a patient in his tent. He was baffled by the symptoms, and whilst he was lost in thought, a snake glided into the tent. The snake leant against Aesculapius's staff. Now this snake was full of wisdom of medicine, which he passed on to the staff. Aesculapius touched the staff, and through the staff he collected all the wisdom that the snake passed on to it. He immediately recognised the patient's complaint and knew the remedy. The caduceus also belonged to the Egyptian god Thoth, and was regarded as a magical rod, a sign of hermetic arts. The snake is associated with the theme of immortality. One of the famous tales that involves a snake and the quest for endless existence is that of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk. He was known as a tyrant who violated women and girls and wore his men out in forced labour. The peoples of Uruk prayed to the gods to help them from their violent king. The gods responded by creating a giant man-beast called Enkidu, who lived with the wild beasts in the country. The gods made it so that Gilgamesh came across Enkidu whilst he was out travelling. Gilgamesh was amazed at this new beast he had found. He was strong like he was, and so he challenged him to a fight between the 2 of them to see who was the strongest. It was a tough battle because they were both equals, yet in the end Gilgamesh does beat Enkidu. He is so taken by this new man that instead of killing him, he makes Enkidu his champion, and they become good friends. The friendship between them helps Gilgamesh to see life in a better way, and he becomes a changed and better man for it. Together they travel the world and encounter many people. One day, though, Enkidu falls ill and dies. Gilgamesh is devastated. He laments for his friend not able to get over Enkidu's death. He finds he has to face the fact that he too is mortal and will one day die. So Gilgamesh sets out to gain immortality. He is advised to see a wise man who lives far away and has the secret to living forever. Gilgamesh and this wise man don't hit it off, but Gilgamesh does impress the wise man's wife, so much so she tells him the secret he desires. The wife tells him where he can find the plant that gives immortality. It grows at the bottom of the ocean. Gilgamesh manages to retrieve it and brings it to the shore. He heads for home with the plant, but on the way stops at a freshwater spring to bathe. A snake finds the plant that Gilgamesh has left on the side and steals it, and thus the snake has immortality. By shedding its skin, it renews its life over and over. The winged serpent is often used in biblical depictions representing the joining of heaven and earth. The wings, the heavenly, the serpent, the earth. In Western astrology, the sign for Scorpio can be represented by a scorpion, a snake, or an eagle. When a Scorpio character is more of an earthy sort, perhaps with a sting in their tail, they are the scorpion version of this sign. The Scorpio person who maybe has a bit more of an open mind and is searching for the knowledge and wisdom is the snake version of Scorpio, and the eagle represents those Scorpios who are free. The earth is alive, energy runs through her, carried by serpents. One can feel it if one is attuned. The snake slithers, crawls across the land and across the planet's surface. There are many giant mounds of natural land that curve their way through the earth. There are rivers that flow like snakes through the valleys, all a natural geology that becomes regarded with snakes, the serpent power flowing through the land, through the waters, along the earth's soil. This planet is alive. Gaia, nature, whatever name you wish to give her, she throbs with an energy, perhaps depleted by today's modern world, but ancients knew it was there and how to harness it, how to tap into it. One of the theories about the reason for the giant megaliths that used to be throughout our lands was that they were aligned to these energies. The stone circles, the stone walkways were put there for a reason by the ancient people who were perhaps trying to harness that very energy. It could well be just the Earth's magnetic field they were tapping into as they walked the serpentine paths between sites. The ancient Britons also favoured the god known as Cronus, the Celtic lord of the underworld and lord of the animals. Associated with him is the ram-headed serpent which he wears as a belt and bracelet. Cronus has ram-headed snakes wrapped around his waist and is often seen seated and cross-legged wearing a set of antlers on his head. Why this old earth god has snakes is not known. There could be a number of reasons. Another intriguing question is, why is it ram-headed? Some say this creature is associated with rebirth and healing. Back in these times, it is said that there was a belief that eating snakes kept one young, and this also applied to wearing serpent-designed bracelets. In Europe, the 15th of March was regarded by the gypsies of these lands as the Feast of Snakes. The snake represents the devil and treachery, so one was allowed to kill a snake on this day to gain good fortune for the year. In Australia, there is a rainbow serpent called Ulunya. This rainbow serpent is the bridge between this world and the dream world. It lives in a place called Miramina, a waterhole meaning rock python bath. Snakes can paralyse us physically with their venom. They can also paralyse us mentally with fear. Why is that? Obviously they can kill us. That's enough for me to pay them respect. But from an early age it was instilled in me that snakes were bad. Bible stories, David Attenborough programmes. Snakes always seem to be on the dark side. Today's kids have Harry Potter to tell them that. The snake, whether as a symbol, metaphor, divine creature, this creature seems to have a mission to awaken humanity to its relationship with its creator. The snake or serpent could possibly be the repository of the knowledge about life and the universe, the relationship between gods and humans. In India, one can see statues of many of the deities dancing on the tops of the many-headed serpent, dancing down upon all their temptations, distractions and negative states that these snakes represent. In India, nearly all the deities have a snake depicted with them. Ganesha has a snake belt, Shiva dances on the snakes, Kali destroys the snake, and Krishna stopped the giant snake by putting his foot on its head and left his footprint there. Yoga is a disciplined practice of meditation and exercise, which can with practice take one to a deeper understanding of the world and the universe. The Kundalini is the word in the body and lies dormant at the base of the spine in the lowest of the 7 chakras, coiled 3 times around the linga in the root chakra. It is known as the serpent power, the serpent of the fire, that when awakened then travels up the body through the aligned chakras onwards to the head where it connects with the third eye. Its aim, through the yoga practice, is to transform one's lower self to the higher state of consciousness. The Kundalini needs to be awakened to allow the female principle within to rise up and join with the male godhead. Serpents appear in numerous medical heraldic signs. One writer I read suggests it is for caution and precaution, because those virtues are needed for medical practices and snakes. So it seems a snake is full of power and wisdom, and it is said if you win a snake's good side, you will never be sick, but if you cross him, you will never prosper. And this may be what led to snake worship throughout the world. All you have heard has been looked up and researched by myself, but you can find out more.